I'm Woody, and this is a tutorial about Unreal Engine 5 Blueprint. Now, I'm making this tutorial not for game devs, but for filmmakers, animators, virtual production people, VTubers, and anyone who's trying to make media in Unreal. While there are a lot of great game dev tutorials out there on how to use Blueprint, Unreal Engine's proprietary visual coding system that sort of runs over the C++ framework that Unreal is built on, they're mostly for game devs. Either people who are going to write a game in it that's like a little bit more low-key, or designers who are going to pass things off to a programmer. With virtual production, something that has been trending in the last few years, and Unreal 5 finally out and existing in the world, we should probably talk about the tech that's making all of this stuff work in the first place. We're going to go through some really basic functionality for those who are new to this. We're also going to break down one of the most fundamental virtual production blueprints, a virtual live tracked camera, and talk about what's going on inside the code. So why do I need to know this? Doesn't Unreal do all of this stuff out of the box? Isn't it just like a big fancy machine full of love and life that will just grant me all the functionalities I need to make photorealistic videos and animations and all sorts of cool stuff? Not quite. Yes and no. So the important thing to know is that Unreal is a game engine. At the end of the day, this thing is designed to make AAA games. Unreal has tools that let us make films and stuff, but they are once again game dev tools. So like Unreal Sequencer, it's a great tool, but it's designed to make cutscenes. What's the difference here? We're using Unreal for real-time animation, rendered animation, live in-camera VFX, and in every one of these scenarios, we're gonna need blueprints. For the classic virtual production in-camera visual effects, we're gonna need a certain form of motion capture to be able to place the camera, and that's gonna take Blueprint. How do blueprints work? Blueprints are node-based code. They're nice because we'll never have any errors because we typed something wrong. We'll have other errors, maybe because we didn't hook something up right, or because we forgot to add a specific property, but in terms of typing things, we're always gonna be fine. We're never gonna have problems with semicolons. Blueprint is a lot like a flowchart, if that makes sense. Let's talk about how to code. For some people, messing with Unreal is gonna be the first time that in their career that they've interfaced with code. Filmmakers traditionally don't really have to use code. So the best way to think about how to code in Unreal and Blueprint, and just kind of in general actually, is a series of commands that are being fired under specific conditions. Let's start by talking about plugins, weirdly. Unreal thrives on plugins. We're gonna need a bunch of them to be able to change Unreal from a game machine into a movie machine, or a streaming machine, depending on what you're doing. A few of my favorite plugins are Twiworks, which is a Twitch plugin, LiveLink XR, Take Recorder, yes, Take Recorder is a plugin, and Control Rig, and yeah, that's a plugin too. So these things need to be enabled in some projects before they're just ready to go. So when you first start looking at a project, start by right-clicking, and you'll click Blueprint class. Immediately this gets super confusing because it's like, what blueprint class? So you see we have all of these options here, and then we also have all of these. Before we go any further, let's talk about actors. Actors are what Unreal uses to create functionality in scenes. Actors can have blueprints, actors can do all kinds of things. Actors are the child of the object class. The object class is basically just anything that you would put in Unreal. You have objects, and the objects are related to one another. So you see that there's actually a lot of things, and if we open the actor, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of actors we can use. Now, if you're creating one from scratch, you can go up here and then to the Create Actor section, and then you can see we have like these basics under these specific menus, and then we also have all classes. So here's all the kinds of actors that we could put in here. While we don't necessarily want to use all of those different types of actors, the further up the chain we go, the less options that we have baked in, but the less functionality that we can borrow. Now that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. For now, for our first actor, I'm gonna select actor. I can click it here, or I can click it here. But select actor for now. So we're gonna get a new blueprint, and we're gonna name it BP underscore my blueprint. Capital Blueprint. Unreal has a dedicated nomenclature. It has a certain way it likes to name things. So I'm gonna open it up, and the first thing we see here is this empty scene. We don't have anything going on in here. We just have this default scene root. And what this default scene root does is like gives our blueprint the ability to exist physically in the world. Now, So there's nothing happening here. We can add components. So like a common component is gonna be like a static mesh. So when we first get it, nothing pops up. However, when we look for one, if I type in cube, then suddenly I have the ability to grab a cube. Zoom out a little bit and here's our cube. We could do that, or if we just want a quick cube, we can also just go to add cube, which is often a little bit simpler. Over here, we have the construction script and the event graph. Construction scripts are fired whenever the actor is edited in the scene. Let's talk about the event graph here. This is where you're gonna be doing most of your coding and functionality. These are events that are taking place in the graph. This is where we can edit all of our code. We also have the My Blueprint section, which explains all the different graphs we have with all of those different events. It explains that we also have this construction script over here, as well as any other functions we add, along with macros, which are a way of sort of stashing away code for modular use, and variables. So you can see in variables, the first thing we have here is components, we've got cubes, and we've got the default root. Now I want to talk about variables because they're really important. So we need variables in order to actually do things in the scene. So I'm gonna go ahead and create one. I'm gonna call this my variable. Now this is really cool. So we have the option up here to edit the variable. We can change the name, we can change the type, we can change what kind of variable it is, we can change the variable data container type. We also have the ability to create this and make it instance editable, which will give us the ability to edit this outside of this editor. A lot of stuff we don't have to worry about. Exposed to cinematics is important for people who are using this in Sequencer, who want to be able to edit things in Sequencer. We can name categories by typing in one, and you can see it's created over here. Currently, we have no default value, and this will happen every time you make a new variable. So in order to edit the default value, we have to hit compile. This just saves a true or false value. Variables are what we're gonna mess with when we're manipulating code a lot of the time, or we'll use it to make sure the right code gets fired. That's being a little simplistic, but hey, we gotta start somewhere. There are so many different kinds of variables, so I thought I'd just run through as an example. We have booleans, which are true or false. We have bytes, which are 8-bit numbers. We have integers, which are whole numbers, essentially. And we have integer 64s, which are 64-bit integers. Floats are floating point value numbers, and what this means is that they are fractional numbers, so they can be numbers like 1.1 or 1.5. They don't have to be a whole number like an integer. Integers can also be negative. Next is really confusing. We have names, strings, and texts. The best I understand it is a string value is a fundamental text string. Like we can use this in multiple places. Text is a little bit more specific to applications where you would show text on screen, at least that's where it most frequently appears. And a name is something that Unreal uses to keep track of things. You'll run into these at various different points. A vector is a set of 3 values that define things in 3D space. Rotators are 1 to 360 values, or negative 360. Rotators are 0 to 360 degree values. Once again, there's 3 of them. And then transform, which combines 2 vectors for location and scale, and a rotator. Those are what's called structs. And structs are really helpful because they let us combine smaller values like some of these fundamentals with other things. You can look, there's a whole structure section here, and we have a whole bunch of pre-built structs. Structs are blue, and they can be broken down into other values. We have the ability to reference other objects as variables, so we could find another actor, and that'll let us get a reference to something in the world. Let me show you. So an actor pops up here, and then we have the ability to name that actor. So if I press compile, then I can name what it is. Now this is grayed out, and this is because it actually needs an actor from the game. And we're not running the game right now, so we don't have the ability to name what that is. I also want to event begin play node. This thing is really helpful. Currently it's grayed out because we don't have it attached to anything. Let's pull out a line here. So I'm gonna type in branch, and then it's gonna create another node here. We can right click, and we can search for anything we're looking for. Context sensitive will mean that we're mostly finding the right things we want because there's a lot of different nodes in Unreal. The branch is really helpful because it will choose whether we change something on true or false. If you've coded in another language before, usually this is called an if statement. So I'm gonna grab my variable. I can drag it out here. I can drag it direct onto the pin to get it, or I can press get my variable. So if I grab it and I plug it in, suddenly my variable dictates the true or false. Now, let's say I want to change where our actor is in the scene. This is a really great example. So I'm gonna drag out from true, and then I'm gonna start typing actor world transform. So I've got a world transform here. I have this transform here, I have a target, I have the sweep, and I have the teleport. Now, we won't worry about sweep or teleport right now, but the target being self means that this blueprint node is going to affect this actor. Now, if we pull out our transform here, this is the information about where this actor is gonna go. So we need to be able to change it. So the funny thing about variables in Unreal is they can be stored inside each other. So the transform is actually made up of different variables itself. So let's look at this. We have the ability to make transform. Now suddenly we've revealed a couple of different variable types. We have a vector here, which is yellow, this location pin. We have rotation, which is a rotator, which is a different kind of transform, which is purple, blue, which is lavender. I love that color, but I don't know what it's called. And then we have scale, which is also a vector. When we make variables, I'm gonna make another one here. I'm gonna call it transform. I have the ability to change this, and I can just choose transform. So I can compile this, and then suddenly I have all of this data right here, and I can change it. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna scale everything up by 2, and then I'm gonna push it 50 degrees up, and then I'm gonna rotate it 45 degrees on the yaw or the z-axis, which means it will spin and not flip or roll. So instead of using this node here, I'm gonna press Alt and I'm gonna click it, and I'm gonna get rid of that, and I'm gonna pull out my transform here. I'm gonna press Get Transform, and then I'm just gonna pop it in here. Now, let's really that crazy. I'm gonna set him right here in an arbitrary space. Now let's press play. At the beginning, well, why is that? We hooked up the blueprint with our branch node. So if I press true, then we can start, because if true, which is now true, checkbox is true, then we'll fire the true line of code. So I'm gonna press compile again. I'm gonna press play. And you'll notice now things look really different. So now notice our scale didn't get applied here. That's because there's a lot of different nodes that work like this. So I press the add actor world transform, and that's sort of a different node than something that will work more directly. And this is kind of what's confusing about Unreal. So I'm just letting you know because this kind of stuff happens. So let's look up our actor transform, and let's try a set actor transform, because you'll notice that we didn't get everything we wanted. We wanted to double the size of the cube by pressing 2 in the scale section. So let's see if we can fix that with a different node that's a little bit more effective. You can see this one set it entirely. It placed everything dead center, except that it moved the cube up a little bit, it rotated the cube, and it made the cube twice as large. So that is what we were looking for, and that's what it did. What if we kept the original? What if we kept it? We could also run the other in the event that our variable isn't turned on. So we can also grab the same transform data and we can run it to both nodes. So I'm gonna set the variable off. I'm gonna press compile. Then I'm gonna hit play. And you can see it's back to what it was doing before, because the other node affects transforms differently than the other. These are some of our most common nodes we'll be using, and then setting transform is something that is going to be really important in virtual production. So the event tick is super clutch here. This is going to fire every single frame, which means that we could actually hook this up. So instead of doing this once, it's firing all the time. So let's do that so that it's always firing. And then let's set it up so that it's always, so that this transform is instance editable. You can see I can also change that by clicking on this little eye over here. So let me show you something pretty crazy. So because this event tick is running, it's always gonna change. So if I press play, that add transform is launching it into the sky. Look, there he goes. And that's because this node is adding a transform. The difference between these two is this is a set static transform. This happens once and it doesn't change. It always puts everything in the same place. And this one adds. So there's all different kinds of nodes we can use. And there's also different kind of transforms. So you can see, so we have two different nodes that kind of look the same, but actually function a little bit differently. There's a lot of this in Unreal. This branch node is flow control, which is adding functionality because it's letting us switch between different things. Now there's actually a bunch of different flow control nodes. I'm gonna go down here and I'm just gonna make them. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more about these, because they all have remarkable functions, like the ability to run a line of code once, or changing the way the code runs out every single time, or putting a delay in that changes when the code gets fired. So right now we're writing in an event graph. We have the ability to create our own custom functionality by creating our own events. So we can create a custom event and we can fire that event. And this will invisibly create a line between this and this without us having to connect it all the way. However, for this between an object reference and a class reference, currently I can't grab this value here. I can do it if it's a class reference. Now this current object reference only grabs real things, but the class reference can grab them in terms of their ideal or default state. So if I change this to a class reference, ask me to change variable type, which is going to be totally fine. Then when I compile, I have the ability to grab all different kinds of types of actors. So I'll grab one that's just called actor. Now, this is really nice for spawning in new objects with their default settings. I also want to show you how you can add inputs. So if I right click, if I move around here, eventually I will find the tab key keyboard shortcut. So I have a node for when pressed. Now I'll press the tab key and then something will change here. I have the option to grab any input that I want from the game, and I'm just gonna press compile. Now by default, this isn't gonna run, so I'm gonna click on class settings, or I'm gonna click on class defaults, and I'm gonna find input. So we'll change that to player 0, and I'll press compile. So now whenever I press the tab key, we're changing the position of our cube, which is pretty crazy. And this is really important. Like, you don't need to know more than this to get started. You just need to know a little bit. So start with this and make a rotating cube. Then suddenly you've had a victory today. Let's change the way our blueprint works here. Let's do something else different with it entirely. I'm gonna show you one of the most common default blueprints that exist. So I'm gonna open this up here and I'm gonna clear all of this data. I'm gonna delete it, and then I'm gonna make sure I have my plugins installed. So I'm gonna go to plugins. I'm gonna open up LiveLink, and then I'm gonna grab LiveLink XR down here. Now this is a Vive tracker rig. This is what lets us do a Vive tracker rig. I'm gonna restart the engine. I'm gonna make sure everything is saved. One thing I forgot is that I need the Steam VR plugin also running at the same time, so I'm gonna click that on. Now in real life, I'm gonna turn on my Vive tracker, and you can see that my controller just became active. I'm gonna click source, and then I'm gonna grab add trackers. So now I have LiveLink XR. I have access to all the LiveLink XR nodes too, so I'm gonna open my blueprint, and then I'm gonna add evaluate LiveLink frame. And on tick, I'm gonna evaluate LiveLink frame. Remember, this is the one that runs every single time. And for class, I'm gonna select the transform role. Now the subject, I just have this one that I just added in, so I'm gonna click it. And then on a valid frame, this is an if statement. I'm gonna get our transform again. I'm gonna set transform. And the set actor transform is going to get data from LiveLink. So I'm gonna break this result. I'm gonna press break LiveLink transformation blueprint data. I'm gonna grab frame data. I'm gonna break it again. You can see I got a transform. So I'm just gonna plug that right in. So I'm good to go. So now, when we're running, if we have this blueprint in the scene, what we should be able to do is get this rotation, which is super cool. It's just rotating and moving. But this doesn't look like a camera yet, so we can fix that. So hold on. Currently we're using a cube to sort of like show what this would look like in a scene. So we can actually get rid of that cube because it doesn't really need to be here. So I'm gonna just delete it for now. Now I can't really see anything. So I want something here. So instead of the cube's not great. So I'm gonna type in axis, and I'm gonna get the axis guide. So that's gonna sit here, and that'll be a little bit more helpful. I'm gonna go up to the make new actor here, and I'm gonna go grab a cinecamera actor. I'm gonna drag it into the scene here, and I'm gonna place it right on top of my blueprint. Now what I've just done is I've parented it. Parenting is also called attaching in Unreal. If you can't find an option for parenting, it's probably because it's attaching. That's supposed to be what it is. Now, I am gonna go zero out all of my transforms here because this is now the relative rotation to the parent, and I've got something here. Now, we might wanna hide our thing that just got right in the way of our camera, but I'm gonna just pull it out because I'm gonna save time. So then, now, when we're running with our camera. Now our camera is invisible, so we can't really see it unless we change that in the blueprint. And like a fast way to do this would just be to create another blueprint class. This one is going to be called player controller. We specifically want player controller this time because there's something that helps us that lives in player controller. And we're just going to call it switch camera. Edit switch camera, and then on begin play, we're going to set view target with blend. Now, what do we have for an option here? So I'm gonna type out here, I'm gonna get actor of class, and I'm gonna grab Cinecamera actor. So I'm gonna get that, and then I'm just gonna plug this into the new view target. You can see it accepts that pin. It's not gonna accept it for anything else except this new view target here. It knows what's up. Blueprint's intelligent, it knows what's going on. So I'm gonna press compile, and at the beginning, here on begin play, it's gonna find that camera and it's gonna set our view to the camera. So I'm gonna start playing, didn't work. Now, why didn't that work? Well, actually, this kind of blueprint needs to be in the scene, and we can't actually drag and drop that into the scene. You can see that drag and drop failed. So I need to go into world settings, and I need to be able to change our world system here. I need to do a game mode override in order to be able to activate our switch camera because I want to put it here in our player class. So I have to make one more blueprint, and this is just sort of a formality, but I'm going to make this game mode base. So I got the game mode base, name it game mode, and then I'm going to find game mode home. Hey, Woody from the future here. I made a little mistake, even though my webcam was covering it up. So if I open it up here, I can click on a specific game mode, and that opens up the opportunity to override specific actor types. Basically, you need to build your new game mode, add it here, and then take your player controller class and add it here. These blueprints are going to be the ones running in our scene. So you can see, now we have a camera that moves around wherever I put the Vive tracker. And that didn't take us very long. That wasn't very much code. That was really, really simple. And you can see this is a lot of raw data, so it looks really nasty. You might want to do something with this. This is like really intense, but it's a lot of fun. And this is this is as easy as it gets for this stuff. It's just a couple of pieces of code. Like it's just, again, I just runs. So you'll evaluate the live link frame, which means we'll get where our live link source is, which is our Vive tracker. We'll break the live link transform data, and then we'll set the actor transform. So every single frame we're gonna set. You could start learning how to use take recorder. You could figure out how to implement this in a motion capture workflow. You could do a lot of different things with something like this. Some of that's gonna be advanced, but this is how you get started. It's just by like using little bits of code to complete small goals. If you are sold and you want in and you want to know more about Blueprint and you want to know about how to program and you want to know about how to make movies in Unreal, I have the place for you. First off, you can subscribe to this channel because this is the kind of content that I put here. While I do other things like I stream and I build crazy VTuber inventions off in other worlds, this is the spot for my projects as well as how to make things in Unreal. If you want to subscribe and you want to like this video, it really helps me out with reaching more people and helping them with their journey as well. Speaking of which, if you want to join our Discord, I wanted to make a space for people who are interested maybe in making media, but also in making games. This strange moment in time we're in where they can kind of be one and the same, or they can be really different, or they can borrow from each other. So if that's you and that's interesting, check out the link below.